The award-winning A Black Executive Perspective podcast presents A Mixed Executive Perspective. Hosted by Fooden Correy, a biracial executive with a distinct voice on leadership and belonging. A Mixed Executive Perspective.
Hi, I'm Fooden Correy, and welcome to A Mixed Executive Perspective podcast. This is a space where we examine how mixed identity is read, interpreted, and often misunderstood in corporate culture and beyond. These conversations aren't limited to Black and white. They're for mixed people across race, ethnicity, nationality, and culture. And they're for parents raising mixed children who are already navigating these dynamics, whether they have language for them or not. In this episode, I talk about hair, how it's read at work, and how it becomes a professional risk calculation, and why mixed people often have a wider range of acceptable presentation that still comes with constant scrutiny. You can't talk about mixed identity without talking about hair. Mixed hair can resemble one parent or another, or something in between. So you can have very coily hair that's blonde, and that might just be how your hair grows out of your head. But my hair is dark and tightly curled because that's what I inherited from my mother. I've worn all different types of styles over time, and I've relaxed my hair. I've worn it natural, I've had braids, and I've dyed it. Not knowing what the hair trends were in Black culture, I often was going counter to what was going on in fashion, and I didn't even know it. And I always received comments about it at work. So what do I take away from this? Hair and skin tone are the first things people read, long before competence, role, or authority. So in this next section, I'm going to talk about risk, range, and strategy. I have advice for all my mentees who are all Black or mixed about the hair choices that they make and the outcomes it may have depending on what roles they're in and in what areas they work in. I have one mentee that has a commission-based role and often works with conservative markets, overseas markets. She even has clients in Alabama. So imagine when she showed up with a bald head, I said, "You're working on commission. Are you going to close sales?" And so we talked about it. We talked about what was going to be an acceptable way for her to wear her hair and be herself, and also be able to close these deals. Living in New York City as a designer and merchant, and also in Los Angeles, coastal, you can get away with a lot more things. And as an executive, I started to notice what gave better responses. I noticed that natural hair, but when it was pulled back into a bun, it almost looked straight. That was straight enough for them. A little short afro, that would do. Dyeing it blonde, not so much. So I had to find myself in what was going to be acceptable in what situation. But I, too, had to travel to places like, the Panhandle in Florida to do presentations. And I had to think about, what was my hair going to look like? How was it going to be received? These were closing very big deals with, big stores and buyers. And I had to be considered something that they would want to trust to be able to close that sale. So understanding risk tolerance in different environments is really important, and something that not only mixed people, but people of color have had to think about all the time. That includes your hair and what you wear so that you will be accepted and you can make the deals you want to make. There is a cost to this constant commentary. There's an emotional burden you carry when you know every room you're going to walk into, it's going to be people looking at your hair. At work, often, we worked really long hours in the fashion industry. I couldn't go to the salon all the time. So there were times when I would come into work after I'd been to the salon and everyone would comment on how good my hair looked. But what that meant to me is the rest of the time, my hair didn't look that good. And I knew it. But there was nothing I could do. If you're working 15 hours a day, when are you going to get this hair done? You know, white girls could just get a haircut and it'd be out in an hour. My hair sometimes took 10 hours. So, where was the time? We worked Saturday. There was no time when that could get done. So these are the things that, there's a cost to this and there's a burden to this that I held with me every day, knowing that people were thinking about how I looked and knowing that they knew I looked better yesterday or that I looked better after I'd been to the beauty salon. So the insight here is that there are rules that are unspoken about hair, that it becomes a constant performance. And it's one that costs time and money. And when I was starting out, I didn't always have that money, and emotional energy without ever offering clarity. So another thing is when the context changes, the meaning changes. So I was asked to go work for a company in Germany, and I was on the third interview. They actually flew me in. I knew I had the job. The relocation manager was showing me the neighborhoods I could move to, and they were telling me about the package they were offering. And then she asked me, do I have any questions? And the question I had was, what am I going to do about my hair? Now, at that point, I thought I was Beyonce, and I had long blonde extensions. And I thought, I just need a place that can do my hair. She pulled the car over, stopped, and Googled, and finally found a place where there was some African hair shops, because there are no African Americans in Germany. I was one of, probably the only one, let's just say it. So she pulled me over she looked at her Google and she said, I've got a street where there's a lot of African hair places, and they're divided by country. So, there would be Nigeria over here, and every country had its own little shop. And I, without looking at it too long and really embarrassed at this moment, I said to her, yeah, I guess that'll do. I'll figure it out. That's how it was. I just was going to figure it out. So I came back and I worked at that job, and I found someone local who would do my hair. And in fact, they actually hired someone who would wash my hair once a week. But then the extensions have to come out. That's every 6 to 8 weeks. You got to change those things. So I went over to the Africa Street and I started looking in all the shops. I had been told that Ethiopia was a good one. So I walked in and I thought, I'm going to try before I buy. So I asked them to wash my hair first. Well, they took the white guy who was sweeping the floors and had him wash my hair. They did not appreciate my long Beyonce hair at all. They were into doing all kinds of intense, different types of natural with different colors, and they were adding more natural hair to their already natural hair. So I didn't fit in at all, and they just had just any old person wash my hair. I left looking like a mess. I didn't know what to do, but I went to work looking kind of like a mess. My housekeeper was North African, and so she had pity on me. She had mixed blonde but coily hair, and she told me a place where I could get my hair done. But she also told me that in this culture, my long blonde straightened hair made me look like a sex worker. So I'm walking around looking like a prostitute, one of 3 African Americans in a company of 15,000 people, and the most high profile of them all, now realizing for the first time that I'm looking like I'm trying to be a prostitute to them. But I didn't change my hair. I made that calculated risk. I did it because I knew I was powerful enough that I could get away with it, and I was going to stand my ground. And I found someone who changed the extensions for me, and I kept my long blonde hair as long as I worked for that company. And, I think maybe I taught them something, or they just thought I was a prostitute on the side. Doesn't matter to me. The bottom line is, it's impossible to please everyone with your hair at work. Choose to wear your hair the way you want when you can, but be strategic and know that if you're closing deals and you're not in that position of power, and if this is going to pay your rent, you may need to make some different choices. Also, be aware of what's going on in other cultures. Just like you have to know, how to greet people when you travel around the world in different cultures, and I've worked everywhere. You also have to understand what your hair is going to mean. In Sri Lanka, I had a small afro for many years. Well, women there all grow their hair as long as possible, and most of them are the same color as I am. So they must have thought, they don't know where this woman came from. She came from Mars, or she didn't have any sense that she didn't grow her hair. But again, I used the fact that I was in a position of power that they couldn't say anything about it. But if necessary, I would have changed it. So what I want to leave you with is that agency comes from understanding the system, not pretending it doesn't exist. Before we wrap, don't forget to check out A Black Executive Perspective, hosted by Tony Franklin and Chris P. Reed. Each week, they tackle leadership, culture, and the conversations many people avoid. You can find it right here on A Black Executive Perspective channel. Thank you for joining A Mixed Executive Perspective, a space where we examine how mixed identity is read at work, in culture, and in the stories we told about ourselves. If this conversation resonates with you, please share your thoughts and comments wherever you're listening to this podcast. In addition, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear this conversation. It helps us reach more people. Until next time, remember, you belong.
A Black Executive Perspective.